I'm recording this locally, so I have to remember later to upload. And let me share. First, quickly, let's go over the slides. But as with everything, it will make more sense when we are seeing it in action. So let me put this a bit bigger. We already mentioned Bootstrap before, and some of you are, if not all of you, have tried it. We will see how it works, what is Bootstrap, and what are the basic three aspects: components, layout, and utilities that we can use from Bootstrap to make some reasonable design and layout of our website. So Bootstrap is a collection of classes, of CSS classes. At the end is CSS. It's just, it already has some classes created, and you can directly use them instead of write your CSS from scratch. And it provides reasonable defaults for these CSS classes, so some nice results for anything that we would like to include in a website, a menu, a form, even a button, and then also some more complex things like a modal or an accordion, or all the different functionalities. It has some good documentation, and here on this, we will be using this to get reference of the different aspects. We are currently on version 5. After version 5, they stopped using jQuery. So the versions before the version 5, they were still using jQuery. And so it depends on if you are searching for some solutions because you have some issue with Bootstrap and you want to see how it's done. It's good that you make sure that the solution is for versions 5 and above if you're using version 5, because the previous one may include solutions that use jQuery. jQuery was a library that we used on top of JavaScript that helped a lot with making our work easier and with compatibility issues among browsers. But bit by bit, it has become less and less used. And so this was one of the critiques on Bootstrap before, that it was still using jQuery and it was kind of losing its popularity. But then that's why they decided to skip jQuery on the new versions, and now they don't use this. So we have these three aspects: components, which are the blocks, the basic blocks of our website, like buttons, forms, and menus. The layout part, that is how we place and position things, a container, the grid, on the website, and then utilities, which is the smaller things that we can tweak on a website, like the margins, the padding, the borders, the alignment, the colors. So all these are on the utilities. And you can see if you go on the Bootstrap documentation that they have here, it's quite good, the documentation. It has a lot of examples as well, and you can just simply copy and paste them and play with them. So here on the layout part, we have the containers, grid, columns, and the breakpoints, which is also important, so that we make our pages responsive, which is also one of the good things when you use Bootstrap, that you can automatically make your website quite responsive easily. And then we have, there is a special for forms, but then we have the components, which are buttons, alerts, a badge, a card, a carousel, drop down, navigation bar. All these are components. And then we have here the utilities, which are these colors, backgrounds, and if the opacity, if the sizing includes margin and padding, etc. If you, Bootstrap helps you include some predefined classes easily and have some nice results, but that doesn't mean that you don't have to know CSS, because in order to know which class you are searching for, you have to know what you are trying to do. So you need to know some basic CSS so that you know that right now here, what I would like is to increase, for example, the padding. And then you see how you do this with Bootstrap. But if padding doesn't sound at all familiar to you, then first we need to make sure we understand what is padding, what is margins, or some basics from CSS we need to know, even if we are going to use Bootstrap. And then the other negative, let's say, of Bootstrap is that then most of the websites look quite similar. And so when you use this, since it uses some predefined styling, you end up recognizing very easily like a button that, okay, this is a typical Bootstrap button, or this is a typical Bootstrap form, which shouldn't bother you right now, because right now we are just starting with styling, and it's nice if we can easily put together some page with a basic styling. But then later, it's important that we also learn how to override the Bootstrap styling and create our own style. So use this as a basis and then start changing things to create also your own touches of style on it. To install it, we have seen this a couple of times or even more on the past. We just have to go to our index file. Either if we are, Bootstrap can work with everything. It doesn't have to work with React or with Vue. It's not dedicated for React or with Vue. It can be with any framework, and also can be in simple, plain, old school HTML pages. So you can just include Bootstrap in an HTML page. And the easiest installation is done via the CDN. So also here, let's see, on download, you get, you can download all the Bootstrap files if you want to make many changes, but the recommended way, especially for beginners, is to just use the CDN. And so we copy these links and we add them to our index.html. We can copy both of them. The first one is for the CSS, and the second one is for the JavaScript. It uses JavaScript for some of the features, like the, I think the accordions or some things that they have like some toggle on-off thing. They use JavaScript for that. So we could add both of them in the index.html. So the index.html depends. If we are on React, remember that there is on the public folder also an index.html. This is where we will be adding Bootstrap, and we will see it in a minute. So the easier way to use it is to include the CDN. And the JavaScript is optional. If you want to have all the features working, you should add this as well. And so the components which were here, okay, we will see now in the example, we will use buttons, we will use a card, and we will use also a modal just to show some of them. The grid, which is the basis of Bootstrap, consists of 12 columns. This is a very classic way of dividing a screen, comes from the past. I don't know when it was decided that it should be 12. This is how it was working from previously with designers. So you have, for any kind of screen, it doesn't matter the size of it. It's always 12 columns, even if you make it smaller or bigger. And so we get the 12 columns, and then we decide each element, how many columns of this grid it will occupy. If it's occupying 3 columns, or if it's occupying all 12 of them. And we could also, with Bootstrap, define that when I resize it, it will change and occupies from 3 to 6 or to the full size. A thing to have in mind also in Bootstrap is that it was created by Twitter. So it is made mobile first, with a mobile first logic. So the default is for small screens. So all the defaults that you have on the Bootstrap page is for regarding small screens. And then we have the breakpoints So when we start controlling the breakpoints, we will make nicer responsive designs. The breakpoint is where a screen changes. So when it passes from small, extra small, small, medium, large, extra large. The breakpoints are explained, breakpoints here, the available breakpoints. So the extra small is the default. That's why you don't really have to put any prefix, because whatever class you use, if you don't specify that it's for another size of screen, it will be regarding small ones. And that means for any screen smaller than 556 pixels, which is a mobile screen. And then we have a small that it's over this, but less than the medium. So between 576 and 768. So between these two, this is small. Then at this point, we start with medium. So over this is medium, over this is large, over this extra large, and extra, extra large. So we have these 6 breakpoints, or 5 and the default, the extra small. And we can, whenever we add this prefix to any of the Bootstrap classes, it means that from that over, do something else. So let's say you start with a column and you specify that one block of code occupies a column of 6. Then you could specify that after the medium, so call slash, no, dash MD. Then after the MD point, we do something else so that it occupies only 3 columns. And again, we will see these breakpoints now in practice. So for this grid, for the Bootstrap grid, the basic structure is to use row and columns. We include the row, it's the enclosing div, and we use the row class to specify that this is a row, and then the smaller parts that we put inside, we use the col class to specify that this is one of the columns, and we specify what is the size of this. So here, for example, we have a div class name row. Here it's used class name because it is from React, this snippet of code. Normally it would be class, okay, if you just use it in index HTML, I mean in HTML, or if you use it in Vue, I think you don't need, yes, in Vue you don't need to change this to class name. This is because, remember, in React, class is a reserved word, and we changed this to class name. So we have rows and columns. And in this case, if you don't specify anything, both columns will be of equal size, and both of them will occupy 6 grid columns. If you want to make them different, you can specify col minus, well, not minus this, how's this called? Dash, the symbol that it looks like minus. So you can specify that this could be 8 and this could be 4. Or specify just that this is 8 and don't say anything for the rest. That means that it will occupy the rest of the size left, the amount of columns left. Like this, we can divide easily the spacing. And even if they don't sum 12, so even if it's bigger than 12, what we are putting in there, this grid is quite intelligent and it will try to fit everything in the proportions that we are specifying. Okay, if we had column 8 and column 8, that sum 16, it wouldn't give you an error. It would just understand that you have to have 2 equal size columns. Or column 8 and then column 4, and then you put another one, column 2. Then it will divide in proportion, like a bigger, smaller, and the half size of it. And then the breakpoints, we can include this prefix, the MD, anywhere. And so that means that above this breakpoint, so above the MD was the 5, no, MD, this one. So for any size screen above these pixels, you will change and occupy 6 columns. So you can put many things together. So for example, for small ones, say call 12, so that means that it will occupy everything. And then for over medium screens, I occupy 6, etc. So this is a mobile first development because we start with the smallest display and adjust it to the bigger ones as the width increases, instead of doing the opposite, create the bigger one and then adjust it to the smaller ones. And then we will see the utilities, border, margin, padding. Just before we go to a concrete example, I wanted to also mention that we also have React Bootstrap. So we can use Bootstrap as it is inside React if we included the CDN in the index file, but we can also install a package that is called React Bootstrap, that it's a version of Bootstrap made specific for React. And there is another one, I think also an alternative that is called React Strap or something like that. They are similar, both of them. It's a way to use Bootstrap inside React, but instead of using these classes, it uses components. So if you check some examples here, so let me see if we have some example with a button or something. Buttons, the typical one. So I'm going to make it a bit bigger. So with normal Bootstrap, we will specify a button, the normal button, not a capital letter button, so the normal button element, and then we would place inside that it's of type class name button, button primary. Okay, so we will use class names, and we will use the Bootstrap class names to define how this button appears. When we use this React Bootstrap, the button is in fact a component, so we have to import it. We import the component button, and then the different variations of it, we pass using this variant. In this case, that would be like a prop. It's very similar to how a React component works. So it transforms the basic elements, the structural elements like the buttons, the alerts, the carousels, the forms, the navigations. It transforms all of them into real components, React components. And then the modifications that we would want for the class, we pass them as props with this way. If you are exclusively going to work with React, then maybe it's even better to learn how to write it like this, because it will make it more uniform, and then you will have everything in components. But if you want to work with different frameworks, or even maybe with no framework, like with simple HTML, maybe it's easier to start with normal Bootstrap, because this will be more universal. Because here you have to remember that I call this variant instead of class name, and then the structure is a bit different, and it's very specific for React. Okay, so for start, maybe just go with a normal Bootstrap to get used to it, and so that you can also reuse it in all the frameworks and everything. And then another thing that we could use when we work with React, it's something that is called Material UI, MUI. Material UI. There is also this Bootstrap and Tailwind. This MUI, it's another library that exists that you could use for working with React, and it's also based on components. So the different things like the buttons and everything, it's here, components. And you can install Material UI, and you see that it looks quite similar to the Bootstrap React. So again, it uses this component style, and you pass the different variations as a prop with this variant. just that the design is a bit different than the Bootstrap because this is made by Google. This is based on the material system, the material design system of Google, which is a group of design guidelines. And so this material UI is also quite popular if you work only with React. This is passing this material design of Google to React with these components. So you may hear of it or you may want to check it. It's also quite popular with React when you work. And then we have another one that I think I have mentioned previously quickly, the Tailwind, which is also gaining a lot of popularity. And this is a bit different than the rest because instead of giving you predefined classes like the Bootstrap that gives button primary, and this button primary class already includes everything, includes that the color will be blue, that the letters will be white, that it will have rounded edges. So it is a class with different things inside, and you just include the class and you have everything. So in the case of Tailwind, we specify all the smaller things. It's like writing CSS, but in a shorter format and inside your HTML. So the classes of Tailwind, like we see here, let me get the typical also, like button example or something. We have a button here. No, because there is no component button, of course. Yes, you. Spacing, padding. I have an example. I have a screenshot somewhere that can help. Where it was from this set. So this is how a button would look like with Bootstrap. You would create button element, class, button, and button primary, and it will create you a blue button. Okay. If you wanted to use this material UI, you would have a button component and you will pass some props to it, like that it's a variant contained. You have to check the description of how its button is called. So this is like this, contained, and the color is primary, and it would create you a primary button. And if you wanted to use Tailwind, you would use the button element again, and then in the class, you will put all the small things that would specify a button, like that the background is blue of this intensity, that when you hover, the background will become this type of blue, that the text is white, that the font is bold. So you actually put all the smallest stuff in here, which at the beginning, it may seem like it's too much work because you actually have to create the CSS class yourself, just that this allows more flexibility. So you can very easily change something small. And so you just come here and instead of text white, you just put text yellow and you have a new button like this. So it allows for more variations and modifications. Which one you will use? At the end, it's a bit of a matter of taste and also what you will find in your job that is being used and that you have to get used to it. We will check Bootstrap, which is the oldest from the three. So Bootstrap is like 10 years old. Tailwind, it's just 5 years old, I think, and MUI maybe 8 years old. So Bootstrap is the oldest one, and it's also quite famous. So we will start with this one. So we will be using this page to get some reference, and yes, here we also have this comparison between the Bootstrap, the pure Bootstrap, and the React Bootstrap that uses these components. Let's go and do an example. It will help us place things So I'm going to use this one. It's a clean React app created with the Create React app. So it's nothing in here. I have the index as it was. The app.js, I just added a couple of headers, which will help us guide what we want to create. And then for using Bootstrap, as I was saying, you have to go to the public folder, find the index.html file, and include in here the Bootstrap CSS, and if you want, optionally, the Bootstrap JS as well. So the two links from the CDN. And then we don't have to worry about the index.html anymore. We can close it. Okay, and let's try to build this. This one is the finished one. I will check just in case I need it so that I don't. Okay, let's see how this looks to start it. Yes, start. And default not found in what index is there? App.js. Export default imported as app was not found. Okay, so I need here. I got the export default, so this should be. I can also put it here. Export default function app. Let me also add like a title, hello, somewhere. Okay, so this is what we have. We will create a simple grid, a simple form, and a card to play a bit with it. Right now, it's not really responsive. It doesn't change much if I move this around. And so we will also be checking this. And let me also open the inspector to have here the elements and the styling from different elements. So the first thing with Bootstrap, we can use a container. And so to put everything inside the container, we check what are the specifications. It gives a bit of spacing on the sizes. And so we could start, and let's say this is our main part. We will put the container around this because I want to leave the navigation bar and the footer that I will be creating later outside the container. So the container will be a bit smaller, but then I want the navigation bar and the footer to go and fill the full width. Okay, so for this, I will add the div here, a class name container, and I will move three things inside. And so you see that it moved this a bit more center, well, leaving this space on the sides. If you check this, you can see what kind of styling it gets. This is the styling that gets from the Bootstrap. And so you see a lot of things because it has how it will behave for different widths. So if it is for extra small, so the default is for extra small. And then what will happen for small, for medium, for large, and so how this will change. If we make this bigger, for now, for the bigger ones, they doesn't change. But if I go smaller, it still gives some space. And if I go to a very small screen, then the spacing around the container is lost, because on the mobile, we try to avoid all these empty spaces. So this is automatically from the container. And let's center also this title that we have. So for this, we can use text center, and it automatically centers this title. So let's start with a simple grid. And as we mentioned, for creating a grid, we first need to create a row, and then inside the row, create some columns. And I'm going to be creating 3 columns to test it, and just add some text in here. So let's copy this text. You see a div, that it's nothing, so it doesn't represent any space. So if we don't put any text, we don't really see anything happening with just creating the 3 divs. Okay, we have to put some content inside to see it in action. And so I'm going to put the same one and the same. So we have these 3 columns. I'm going to also add for each column a header. Column 1. And column 3. And by default, they have this small spacing in between them. If we check the elements, the default is that it leaves a bit of spacing on the sides, a gap between the 2 columns. And so this behavior right now is for all, even for the smaller ones. So even if I go here on the smaller one, it's still 3 columns, because what I defined here is for the default one, that is the small one. So even for the small one, I defined that I have 3 columns, one next to the other. Of course, this doesn't look very nice when I have a small screen. Maybe for the small screen, I would like to be one stack above the other. So what I will do is that I will say that these 3 columns is for the medium screen. So let me just put, or like for the small screen, it occupies 12. Let's do it just for 1 to see what happens. So that means that when we are on the small screen, this column occupies the whole size, 12. Okay, the rest I did not change, so they are still 2 columns occupying the rest. And I could define that when I am above the medium, then this occupies 6, and the other 2 will occupy the space left. So like this. So here you can play a bit to get, this is occupying now 6, and the other 2 occupy the space left, divided equally between the 2. So when I'm going smaller, and I arrive to the break point, then this occupies the 12, the whole column. And I could put these to all 3 so that I make sure that when they are on the small size, one is stuck under the other. So the default, if I don't put any prefix, is what will happen for the smaller size. Okay, and then if I can specify different things. So for the small size, do this. Then for the medium size, do this. For the very large size, occupy just 1 column of the 12. So maybe, let's say, large. I just want it, large should be empty. I just want this to occupy one of the 12 grid spaces. And so we'll see that when I start making it bigger, this one occupies just one. The rest are still occupying all because I didn't specify anything happening for medium and above. So the behavior of this. You can play a bit with these breakpoints and what you want to happen between small, medium, especially for that. Or another thing that we could use, so let me remove this. And now I have it also like this. And then on the medium, this one occupies 6, and then the rest would be divided between the two. But since I have defined that they occupy the whole thing, then they go from one side to the other. Here, I would like to add some space between the previous column and the header of the next. Right now, it's only space around, but let's say I want to add some spacing on the bottom of each column. So what I will do is here, I will specify some margin. Okay, so some margin bottom, MB. You don't have to remember, of course, but you can come here, utilities, spacing, and see how we define margin and padding. M is used for the margin, P is used for the padding. And so the sides are with these letters, top, bottom, left, right. So start at left, right. And then how much padding you would like to add. You don't specify it in pixels, you specify it with 5 numbers from 0 to 5. And it's actually a multiple of this variable that is internally set on the Bootstrap. So I never really know how exactly it is. I'm just playing between margin bottom 2, 3, 4, 5 and see which one I prefer. So let's say margin bottom 3, it moved this a bit, it left a bit of space. If I want some more, I can play and say margin bottom 5, and then it will leave some more space. So I can play a bit and position this and see how I like it to be when they are stuck like this. And I will have to copy this to all. So if I want to have this, I will leave it to 4. So another drawback, let's say, of using Bootstrap is that you have to copy a lot of classes, repeat a lot of classes. So instead, maybe if you would work with normal CSS, you would create one class for each column that included everything, like how much space you would want to occupy, how much would be the border, if you wanted some margin on the bottom, if you want some margin on the top. And instead here, you simply copy the same class again and again. And so you end up having many classes on your code if you want to put all the different small variations that you want here. Okay, so I have it like this. Maybe I'm going to leave columns so that they adapt these two. And so like this. So when it's bigger, I have one big column and 2 small ones. And then on the smaller size, they also occupy this space. Okay. If I want to override something, for example, now I have this H2, and in fact, I have already done this. I have some styling, so you can still load your CSS and do something, some styling. So I wanted to have a green bottom line here, border line, after the H2, so after this title. And so I added that for the H2, I want some margin and some border of this size. and this color. And so since I load this CSS file here, this H2 will not get the default bootstrap, or apart from the default bootstrap, some of the properties will be overridden by the ones that I am providing. Okay, so if I did not have this, you will see that the default behavior is like this, with no line and with no margin. Okay, so I have my 3 columns. This is used a lot, the row and column, and you can also use it inside other elements. For example, in a form, if you want 2 input fields to be one next to the other, the easier way is to create a row and then put the 2 columns and then put one input in one input on the other, and also modify so that on smaller screen, then they move and you have a form one next to the other. Let's add a form as well. So for the forms, let's come here and forms. And we'll try to copy simple one so that we don't have to create everything. So I'm just going to copy this one. In here. There are a couple of things that you need to change if you copy this code that you have as an example. So this form here. First, there are some elements that they are not closed property. We need to close them because in React, every element should be closing either with the equivalent closing element tag or with this slash on the end. So this input that they are marked here as a mistake, it's because they are not closing correctly. And I need to close those. Then another thing that we need to change is that this class needs to be transformed to class name. Okay, so we automatically replace class with class name. And also the form should be transformed to HTML form. So I'm going to replace this as well. And so now it should be more React proper. And we have this simple form with some class name. This is for margin bottom. And so this is for marking that this is a label. So these are all Bootstrap classes, but you don't have to understand everything. If you like how it looks, we can copy and then start playing with it. And here we have our simple form. So it's okay when it's small, because if we're on a small screen, then we have this form with one field on top of the other, and that's okay. But if we are on larger screens, then we would like to fix this because we don't want an input field that huge. So for this, we would need to come in here on the form and say that for create a div around the form. So let me create a div element and I will place the form inside. And so for this div, I can specify that if I want this to occupy, let's say, half the space, so I don't want it to be the full length, I want it to be half the space, then that means that I have to specify that it will occupy 6 columns of the 12. So that means that I will need to specify the row and column format. So I should have like an enclosing row div, and then another div for specifying that this is a column, this form. I'm going to copy it again inside that div. this form is one of the columns, and it's a column that occupies 6. But I don't want it to occupy 6 always, so I don't want it to occupy 6 also when I'm on the small screen. I want it to occupy 6 grid columns when I'm on over medium. So instead of just saying column 6, I will say column medium 6, so that over the medium size screens, this will be occupying only half length. So now when I'm on the bigger ones, I'm half. And then when I go to the small size, I'm still on the default behavior, which is occupy the full length as it was. And then another thing I would like to change is that the form is not on that side. I want it to be centered. So for this, what we can also use is an offset. And so we specify here on this column that the column, these 6 columns that the form will be occupying, they don't start from column 1, but they start from column 3. So there will be an offset on these medium screens and over of 3 columns. So that means like leave 3 columns empty on the front when I'm on over medium screens. And that pushes the rest of your content, and you have 3 columns here, and then the rest of the space here depends on what you have defined, if this occupies a 6 or 4. So then you play a bit with the numbers to place it as you like on the middle. And maybe here I would like some more spacing from the top. So I could also specify, let's say on this row, that margin top 3 or 5, and move it a bit to leave some space here. So see this one, it's a typical blue button that we have seen with a button primary. Okay, let's see some cards as well. Tell me if you have any doubt or any question. I'm going to go with the cards, which are also useful elements. And I know that I probably will be needing also a row and column, because I want to have like 2 or 3 different cards, one next to the other. So I will already create the divs for row and column for that. Let's have one for now. And let's see the card element. So this is a component. Here, card. Cards are things that they look like that. There is some enclosing box with an image. The image is optional. You can have an image, you can have a title, some text, you can have some button. So here you have some examples, and you can even have a card with just body, just the text, if you want the text to look nicer, like around with a card, with a title, with some links. So there are some examples here with the image on top, with the image on bottom. You can specify if the image is above or below the text. And you can also group together things so that the rounded edges are around the 3 cards. For example, here we have one looking, all of them looking as a block of things. So here there are a lot of examples that you can start. Kitchen sink, it's called, where you have everything together. So you get this, and then you can have an image and a card title and a body and the 3 items and links. So you have everything. It's called kitchen sink for this. But let's take a simpler example, a card with an image. So let's say this one. I'm going to copy this and put it here inside my column. And again, see this thing here is because the image is not closed correctly. And I need to, again, change the class to class name. This time I'm going to do it manually. Okay. And let me grab some image, funny dog images. Which one should I take? Let's take this guy here. Okay, let's see how our card looks. There is some error. Because there is a style. Okay, for now we'll remove the style and we will add it back because I want to show you also, or maybe it's a good opportunity to show you how style works. I don't think we have seen the style property in React. So with style in React, you cannot pass a string like that. You need to pass an object with the different properties that you want to put in style. So we need to transform this string to an object. And for this, you actually need double curly braces because the outside curly braces is to define that this inside here is something of a JavaScript so that we have JavaScript code. And then the inside curly braces is to define that this it's an object. Okay, and doesn't like this. Okay, it needs to be, if it is an object, this needs to be in a string format because it's an object with a property and a value that it's a string. Style property value shouldn't contain a semicolon. Yeah, okay, like this then. Don't like it. And here we have our card. So if you want to add inline styles, you should remember you have to use this double column, and also you have to transform because then this will be a JavaScript object. It cannot accept things with the dash because it translates this as a minus. So if you wanted to set, let's say here, the background color, you cannot put background color like this. You need to transform it to this camel case and use background color, and then in here, the value that you want to pass. So when we use style, we use this format with the double curly braces and the things inside as object properties. So like this, I quickly have this card with an image and some text. And if I want, I can add more cards. Right now, this column is the only column I have. It should occupy, actually it should occupy the whole space because I have a row with just one column. But just because I defined that the width of the image is like this, small, it has limited this. You will see that if I remove this style, then my card occupies the full size. Okay, so I can specify the size of it, or what I can do also, maybe I need more cards, I will just copy, in fact, I will copy the column, it's here, and I will create columns like this. And so I have some, I don't know, team photos with the name or something, and you can have 4 columns. I don't always put 3. Where does this end? Here. Let's put another one. And it automatically fits them like this. So there are some properties in the card if you want to use a card. So the whole, this box, it's called the card. And then it has a card body, which is this part here, with a card text. We could add a card title. So there are different properties. Let's say I'm going to add an H4, Mr. Chief of Staff. Stuff called like this, and then I will add the class name to this of card title, and this is how the title would appear here. Okay, so I don't want to waste too much time more on this. I will just create a navigation bar so that we also have this because it's something quite useful on all pages. And for this, we will check again here, components, navigation bar. So navigation bar, normally it has its own container. It's a container fluid by default. That means that it will always occupy the full size of the screen. Because also you see in most of the pages, the navigation bar like this stays on top. It goes from one side to the other, and then maybe the main content has some space around, but the navigation bar, it doesn't. And so there are different things. Let me just grab some simple navigation bar. With the hamburger, I think this one would do. Let me copy this. Okay, I think, yeah, this is the same, but instead of list, it uses a div. And I'm going to place it here. And again, I need to change the class to class name. Class to class name. And let me check my page. Here is my navigation bar. And this automatically also includes this hamburger menu, so that when you start being on smaller screens, it transforms the navigation bar to this menu that opens like this. And it is already included. And the first one, this nav bar here, it's what it's called a brand. This is where normally you would put the logo or an image. So we could change this. And this would be our logo, or you can put some image here. And then, so this first element is the navigation brand. And then this second element, this button, it's actually this hamburger button. So this toggler that it says, it's what happens when we have a smaller screen, and then it has already some behavior created for you so that it opens and closes when you click this icon. And so then this is the list items, the menu items, and we can remove some so that we don't have as many. But anyway, each item has a class, nav item, and it has a link that it's navigation link, etc. So we can try to play a bit with this and modify it. And let's say I want my menu to be of a different color than this gray. This gray color comes from this class here, the background body tertiary. If we check, let me go here, color scheme. Here we have a bit of different color schemes that you can use, like a darker, and also the letters. How you can change the letter depends on the background that you will choose. So if you choose a dark background, then have light letters. And so if I want to modify this color, I will need to remove actually this background body tertiary and create my own color for the navigation bar. So I say navigation bar, it should have the background color teal. I can put this directly on the CSS. And so like this, it takes this color that I have defined. And now the letters, they are not very distinguishable. So I need to change the class here, use one of the lighter scheme letters. So I need to basically add this. That is, when the theme is dark, then the letters become white. So I need to add this part on my navigation bar as well. Here. And so it makes the letters look white. And if I close this, I have this like this, and I can modify it. I can add some spacing on the title. So, and then in a similar way, I can create the footer. I will stop now so that we have some time also to go over your MVPs. But this is a relatively quick way. So in 1 hour, more or less now, also explaining and going through stuff and everything, I can manage to create a simple structure, a form, some cards, some menu that doesn't look that bad. It still misses some personal touches. You could tweak a bit the colors, the background, so that it's not that white one. Maybe choose a different font if you like, so that you have the personality in the fonts. But I hope like this that you can, even the ones that you didn't try Bootstrap yet, you can maybe give it a go. And it can also be combined, always be combined with your own style as well. So you can just keep the menu, let's say, and have the rest in your own CSS style. But if the menu is something that you want to have like this, responsive easily, then you just include the menu. Or we can have the button. Where do we have the button? Here it's our button. We can have some nice modal. The modal is the thing that you click and it opens, so that when you click on a button, this other window comes up, and this is called the modal. So here have a button that when you click, something comes up, a message or some action for the user. This is the modal. And we have this also, the code is already here as well. You just need to connect your button, a button, to this modal. So you create a button of type button, and then with this, the toggle modal and the target example modal, you connect it with the model that you have created below. So this code is the actual window that opens when you click the button. So this code you can put anywhere. Let me try it. I copy the modal code. I just put it on the bottom of my page, let's say after the footer. And let me also copy again and replace all of this. So this is the model. It will not show on your page. So even if I copy this div here, it is created with the hidden class, so that it doesn't show anywhere until I click the button that links to this example modal label. And I'm going to just modify my form button for this. Here, instead of a submit button, I will just make it a normal button and copy this. Wait, copy this directly. So the button that will be opening the modal. So it's still this blue button primary, but it is connected to a modal, and it is connected to this specific modal that I have written down there. So now if I click it, it opens. This is empty. You can put some things inside. It has already the functionality for closing. And then maybe you can connect this button with some other functionality. Like if I was doing a to-do list, maybe I would like to just have this, and the form for adding an item should be like this. Add an item, and then you put the item there, save it, and then you go back to the page again. Okay, questions?
What is the shortcut that you use to do the replace quickly?
Yes, Command F. Command F. In the Mac, it's Command F, Control F, or Alt F in Windows. So it's for find. So yes, if I click in my Mac Command F, then this opens, that is for finding, search for something. And if I click on this toggle replace, it also opens this thing that is with which I want to replace it with. So this is what I'm searching, and this I will replace with. Other questions? Maybe you already have your design done, but just in case, if you are still like don't have any ideas, any design, or don't know where to start with a design, because design is also its own thing, then maybe you can try to put something quickly together like this. And yes, don't worry if you don't have too much time. It will look kind of neat and professional like this, even if it's not the most unique design, but it will do. Okay, I'm going to stop